All right, good evening. It is 6 o'clock. Thank you for coming. I am Rolando Gonzalez, Community Affairs Representative. Thank you for coming to the last Water Wednesday of 2023. We are so glad you could join us. We have an exciting webinar for you, Wastewater and the Future. Before we begin, please be advised that tonight's webinar is being recorded. By participating in this webinar, you consent to the recording of audio and visual content. The webinar will be posted on EBMUD's YouTube channel by the end of this week if you would like to review it again. Wastewater is a vital component for the health of the Bay Area and for everyone. Think of it in these terms. Water is the blood that flows through the body, and wastewater treatment is like the liver working hard to remove contaminants before the water is returned to the bay. It is an essential and vital component to the health of the East Bay community. Our presenters today from the wastewater staff are Jennifer Koo, Associate Civil Engineer, Matthew Heft, Senior Civil Engineer, and Zoe Lake, a Wastewater Control Representative. We will also be joined by Mr. Amit Mutsuri, he is the Director of Wastewater for EBMUD. He will join us for the Q&A session at the end and help answer some of your questions. We also have Catherine Horn, Senior Community Affairs Representative, who will also help us with the Q&A chat. We will answer your questions at the end of the presentation. You can, however, start adding your questions to the Q&A chat feature. The controls should be at the bottom of your screen. Thank you for coming. And with this, I will turn it over to Jennifer Koo. Thank you.
Thank you, Rolando. And I will take over on the slides. There we go. Okay, so first, this is an overview of what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to start off with an overview of the wastewater treatment system and the treatment process. And then we're going to talk about the hot topics that we in wastewater are talking about, namely sea level rise, nutrients, and aging infrastructure. Then we're going to have a call to action for everybody listening in on us or listening to our talk today. And then we'll finish up with the Q&A. So here is our wastewater system. Our wastewater system is large and complex. So we are the third largest wastewater agency in the Bay Area behind San Jose and San Francisco. So we serve 740,000 people. So there are many types of infrastructure that make up the wastewater system as a whole. So they include 1,600 miles of private sewer laterals, which belong to homeowners and property owners. So the private sewer laterals means they're privately owned. We have 1,600 miles of pipe in the sewer collection system that's owned and maintained by the communities that make up our wastewater service area. So these satellite communities are Alameda, Albany, Berkeley, Emeryville, Oakland, Piedmont, and Steege Sanitary District, which consists of El Cerrito, Kensington, and part of Richmond. So their sewer fees may actually appear on our EBMUD bills, but those costs are actually not determined by us. Also, you may notice that our wastewater service area is smaller than our water service area. So if you live outside of the yellow area on the map or live outside of the communities that I listed before, your wastewater is actually treated by another wastewater agency. So now onto what EBMUD owns and operates. So we have 37 miles of large pipelines, 1 wastewater treatment plant, 3 wet weather facilities, 15 pump stations, 10 level monitoring stations, and 5 overflow structures. So before wastewater treatment, wastewater was discharged directly to San Francisco Bay without any treatment at all. So one example is shown on the photo at the top left. This is the Strawberry Creek outfall, which conveyed sewage from UC Berkeley to the bay. So there's pipes like these discharging waste all along the shoreline. So as a result, the odor in the bay was named the Big Smell. So this newspaper clipping on the right warns residents of San Francisco to clamp their noses with clothespins the next time that the big smell came in from the East Bay. So something had to be done to address this lack of sanitation. So EBMUD's wastewater treatment plant began operation in 1951. So wastewater in a service area comes from various homes and various different type of businesses, such as restaurants, manufacturers, and laboratories, just to name a few. But one type of water that should not be a wastewater source is stormwater. So some people may know that San Francisco has a combined sewer and stormwater collection system. So we in the East Bay do not, since our system was not designed to handle that amount of water. So some rainwater does unfortunately make its way into our system through broken pipes or improper connections. So this water we call inflow and infiltration. We're going to talk about our work to reduce those sources later on. So here's an overview of the treatment process. Whoops. So this schematic shows a simplified sequence of what happens after you flush. So we're going to go from left to right. So wastewater leaves your house via a private sewer lateral. From there, it goes on to the city's collection system. Next, it goes on to the EBMUD interceptors. So the analogy to compare the size and capacity of each of these is, think of the lateral like the driveway to your house. The collection system is the city streets. The interceptor is the freeway equivalent, which is the biggest and can handle the most flow. So the interceptors are large pipes that are called interceptors because they intercept the wastewater from the collection system and direct it to the main wastewater treatment plant. So EBMUD only owns and operates the facilities within this black box. That's the interceptors and the treatment plant. So the treatment process may seem complicated at first. The easiest way to think about wastewater treatment is to think of it in three parts. So you have the physical, the biological, and the chemical. The specific processes are broken down in the blue arrows below. So another thing that people don't realize is that wastewater treatment involves both liquid and solids. So I'll talk about both. So our first treatment step when wastewater enters the treatment plant is called preliminary treatment. So this is a physical treatment step since we are physically removing items from the water. So we utilize a series of large screens that catch and remove trash and debris that are in the wastewater. Everything removed here is sent to a landfill. So the picture in the middle is our core screens. So the core screens have bars that are spaced 6 inches apart, and they remove large objects like 2x4s, construction debris, or spools of rope. So to the right of those, it's a picture of our fine screens. These have the spacings of 3/4 of an inch, so a lot smaller. So they catch a lot smaller items like small toys, action figures, credit cards, and a lot of wipes. So next up is primary treatment. So primary treatment is a physical process that relies on gravity. So over time, heavy particles will sink to the bottom of our tanks due to gravity, and it makes the wastewater look less dark and more clear, as demonstrated by the glasses up here on the upper right. So I've included a photo of where these processes are located on our plant site in case you're curious of what you're looking at as you happen to drive by on the freeway. So in these tanks, we slow down the flow so that the settling has time to happen. So we also remove anything light that floats up to the top. You can kind of think of it as a wastewater lazy river. So this is the level of treatment that was provided in 1951. So next we have secondary treatment. So secondary treatment is a biological process. This step relies on microorganisms to break down dissolved organic waste in the wastewater. Secondary treatment was also added to the treatment plant after the Clean Water Act was passed in 1972. So here's photos of our secondary treatment process. So first we have the oxygen reactors. It's shown in the inset on the lower right-hand side. So in the reactors, we have the microorganisms. I'm going to call them bugs for short. They break down the dissolved organic waste and nutrients. So there we pump liquid oxygen into the reactors to keep these bugs happy eaters. We produce our own oxygen on site. So the oxygen production plant, it's located next to the reactors and is easily identified by the two large towers, which is in the inset picture on the top left. So from the reactors, the flow moves on to the clarifiers. And that's the semicircle of tanks that's outlined in the middle of the screen. So in the clarifiers, we have heavy particles and microorganisms. They settle down to the bottom. So the bugs have gotten heavier from all their eating in the reactors, so they settle out easier. We'll call the settled material sludge. So the clarifiers function similar to the primary sedimentation tanks in that they use gravity. Excuse me. The only difference is that these tanks are circular instead of rectangular. So some of the sludge that settles to the bottom of the clarifier is actually recycled back to the reactors to maintain biological treatment. So if you make bread, you kind of think of it like feeding your sourdough starter to maintain the microorganism population. And then the rest of the sludge is sent on to the solids treatment process. And also I want to take this moment to remind people, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A and we'll answer them as we get to the end. So the next step is, or the final step in the liquid process, is disinfection. So this is chemical treatment, followed by dechlorination and discharge. So disinfection with chlorine bleach happens inside a large pipe that we call the outfall. So the diagram on the slide shows our outfall pipe as a yellow line running parallel to the freeway. So the outfall runs about 2 miles from the treatment plant to the edge of the shoreline. So the chlorine that we use to disinfect the germs has to be removed prior to discharge to the bay. So we add one last chemical into the outfall to dechlorinate the water as it approaches the bay. The photo at the top left shows our last building where we sample the water to ensure that the treated wastewater meets all requirements for discharge to the bay. Treated wastewater is then discharged 1.2 miles out at a depth of 50 feet. It's important to note that the water is not blasting out of the end of the pipe like a fire hose. Instead, it's like a drip irrigation system where the water flows out through a series of small holes in the pipe, specifically the last 700 feet of the outfall pipe. So this helps dilute treated wastewater with the bay more effectively. Our discharge location is also ideal as the central bay is deep and has good tidal recirculation. So as I mentioned before, wastewater treatment also involves treating the solids in the wastewater. So the solid wastes removed from the primary and secondary processes are sent to the anaerobic digesters. So anaerobic means no oxygen. So the solids treatment process is the opposite of the secondary treatment step, which needs a lot of oxygen. But like the secondary treatment step, this is also biological. So in the digesters, we have more microorganisms. These are called methanogens. They break down the solid waste and create biosolids. So you can think of biosolids as a nutrient-rich product like fertilizer or potting soil. So in the process of breaking down the solids, microorganisms burp and fart out what's referred to as biogas or methane. So the biogas that's produced is energy-rich and is used to generate electricity. To help our system generate more energy, we also take in waste from winery, dairy, and food manufacturers as part of our resource recovery program. So these wastes would otherwise be diverted to a landfill if we did not take them for our digesters. So it's a win-win since our digester bugs love these wastes. Happy bugs are gassy bugs, and so we generate enough energy on site to power the treatment plant and even sell the extra to the Port of Oakland. We were, excuse me, we were actually the first wastewater treatment plant in North America to become a net energy producer. So the key difference between the liquids and solids treatment process is time. While liquid treatment is achieved within 6 to 8 hours, solid treatment takes about 20 to 22 days. So here are some photos of the solids treatment process. We have a picture here on the bottom right of one of our digesters. This one has a membrane cover, which moves up and down depending on how much biogas is being produced. From there, the biogas is then piped to our power generation station and turbine, which is where we generate our renewable energy. Okay. So now that you have a brief overview of the wastewater treatment process, let's dive into some of the hot topics. So to give you some background on our sea level rise work, back in 2020, we developed a wastewater climate change plan. So for this plan, we looked at various aspects of climate change and evaluated their potential impacts to our wastewater facilities for years 2050 and 2100. So the impacts that we looked at were sea level rise, groundwater rise, changes to rainfall patterns, and increases in temperature. So the climate change estimates that we used were from the International Panel of Climate Change, the IPCC Fifth Assessment, Representative Concentration Pathway 8.5 scenario. So this scenario assumed a worst case scenario of no greenhouse gas reduction, so a very conservative estimate. So the estimates that provided here on the slide are actually what's expected locally. Global averages may be different. So as I said, our wastewater facilities were evaluated for sea level rise impacts at 2050 and 2100, utilizing data from the Adapting to Rising Tides project by the San Francisco Bay Conservation Development Commission. So we found that there was no impacts to our wastewater facilities at 12 inches sea level rise, the 2050 estimate. This map shows the estimated inundation depth at 36 inches, which is the year 2100 estimate. I also make a note that the map here is rotated, so north is to the left, just so everything is better situated on the slide. So compared to other wastewater treatment facilities in the Bay Area, the EBMUD wastewater facilities are actually better situated. Our treatment plant is actually not expected to see any flooding. We do potentially see some impacts of a half a foot or less at some of our remote facilities in 2100. We do have one pump station, which could potentially see 5.5 feet. The impacted facilities are mostly located in Oakland and Alameda. The worst flooding is expected near the Oakland airport and Bay Farm Island, but there are studies in the works by the Port of Oakland and the City of Alameda to figure out how to address it. And this slide shows a closer up view of the treatment plant at the 36-inch estimate. This map has north pointing back to the top again. And you can kind of see the treatment plant is dry. No water's near there. So this image shows what the area would look like with sea level rise and storm surge. So storm surge is rising water caused by storms winds pushing the water on shore. So storm surge is on top of the normal tide and any sea level rise. It's important to note that storm surge is temporary. So compared to 36 inches sea level rise, some flooding will be present at the treatment plant and into parts of West Oakland. The amount of flooding at our facilities here are minimal, less than 2 feet, and doesn't impact any of our major processes. I will note in this scenario, water is coming from the south near the foot of the Bay Bridge. This flooding scenario may have changed since the City of Oakland has since raised some roadways in the former Oakland Army base in the time since this map was originally developed. So let's take a closer look at our facilities near the foot of the Bay Bridge. So this is where we have our two structures that are part of the final part of the wastewater treatment process, our dechlorination facility and transition structure. You can kind of see them noted in yellow. So the transition structure is where we collect the samples of treated water. So this is a close-up view at 12 inches sea level rise. Both facilities are expected to be fine in terms of flooding. And so while it may look like the transition structure is flooded in the map, the building and equipment inside are elevated, as you can see the inset photo. So it's fine. So at 36 inches sea level rise, access to the transition structure is impacted. The water level is higher, but not high enough to block access to the facility. The water level in front of the building ranges from 0 to 1 feet, so a good pair of rain boots will easily get you through. The transition structure itself is elevated 2.5 feet. So this is that same area with sea level rise with storm surge. So as a reminder, storm surge is temporary. Flooding in front of the transition structure is close to 2.5 feet. So staff would likely be encouraged to avoid the area until the water level has subsided. Water is also starting to encroach upon the dechlorination facility as well. So the water level in that area is less than 1 foot along the backside of the building. Since we are aware that there are potential impacts from sea level rise, we actually recently completed construction to raise the on-site emergency generator at the site 3 feet to keep it safe from future sea level rise. So how is wastewater addressing sea level rise? So we've developed planning and design guidelines for sea level rise for our wastewater facilities. As part of these guidelines, we developed a sea level rise calculator and checklist for our project managers to utilize as new projects begin. Based on results, it provides guidance on how to proceed. For example, should we look at using submersible equipment or raising the electrical equipment? As previously mentioned, the dechlorination facility completed improvements to raise electrical equipment and the emergency generator on site. We also have a pump station located on Bay Farm Island in Alameda that's currently being rehabilitated. So a part of this work includes elevating the electrical equipment inside to address future sea level rise. District staff's also involved with local organizations to discuss climate change issues. BayCan is a network of local governments and organizations across the entire Bay Area. This group discusses a wide range of issues from sea level rise, heat events, wildfires, funding opportunities, and upcoming climate legislation. And then we have the Oakland Alameda Adaptation Committee, which is focused on addressing sea level rise in the San Leandro Bay and Oakland Alameda estuary area. It's composed of local cities, agencies, and non-governmental organizations. Planning for adaptation projects is already in the works with the City of Alameda leading the effort. So I also want to touch upon groundwater rise as well. So this map here shows the depth to groundwater at our treatment plant. So most of the plant has a groundwater depth of 6 to 9 feet. For our work on this, we assumed there would be a 1-to-1 ratio of groundwater rise to sea level rise. That basically means for every 1 foot of sea level rise, we expect groundwater would also go up 1 foot. So basically what we found is that inflow and infiltration in our system could increase if pipes are not maintained. We also did find that there would not be any negative impacts to below grade structures from buoyancy. That just basically means we don't expect our underground tanks or pipes to start floating because of rising groundwaters. But research on other impacts from rising groundwater does continue. Staff from UC Berkeley and the San Francisco Estuary Institute, among others, are doing a lot of work locally on this front. And now I'm going to pass it on to Matt to talk about the next hot topics.
Thanks, Jennifer. I'll let you catch your breath after that long presentation. I'm Matt Heft, Senior Civil Engineer in the Wastewater Planning section. And so a few other topics we explored in our climate change plan for the wastewater department were these here you see on the screen. So of course, the temperatures are rising as climate change is happening. But in California in particular, we're expected to see shorter wet weather seasons, therefore longer dry weather seasons. And most impactful to us, we're expecting more intense storms. So when it does rain, we're expecting more intense, more rainfall. And that affects us because even though our system is designed, as Jennifer said, to only accept wastewater, over time, our system has aged, and more importantly, the systems that drain to the East Bay Mud system, the city's collection systems, and the houses and their private sewer laterals, those pipes have aged, cracked, roots have broken through, and that causes I&I, something we called inflow and infiltration. So when a rainfall event occurs, we get more water into the system, and that's when we see our highest flows. We call them peak wet weather events. And so this image here to the lower right is like the classic atmospheric river that you hear so much about these days. And so as climate change occurs, we're expecting to see more atmospheric river events, and we'll have to deal with those through our I&I program. And Zoe, who's speaking after me, will explain a little bit about that program. But switching topics to nutrients. So last summer, you may have seen on the news, or you may have seen for yourself, there was a algal bloom in the San Francisco Bay in the summer of 2022. Picture on the left is an aerial view of that reddish brown algae growing and proliferating throughout the bay. That was an algae called Heterosigma akashiwo, and it was an unexpected event. We don't know exactly what prompted it, but there's a series of factors and parameters that would go into prompting an algal bloom. And unfortunately, it led to what you see on the right, a large fish kill. Thousands of fish were killed as a result of this algal bloom. And then you see the rather dramatic headline on the bottom related to it. And the reason it says fixing the problem could cost $14 billion, well, one important ingredient to an algal bloom is the food or the fertilizer, the nutrients in the bay. And wastewater treatment plants are one significant source of nutrients, and I'll explain. Next slide. So nutrients, when we talk about in this context, usually refer to nitrogen and phosphorus. So for us in the San Francisco Bay, nitrogen happens to be the most important when it comes to algal blooms. But even though I've introduced this topic as maybe a negative thing, nutrients are a necessary ingredient for both life itself and but then also when things can get out of a balance, it can cause algal blooms, and that results in potentially negative effects. But those algal blooms are not just triggered by nutrients. It's many other factors: water temperature, sunlight, salinity. All these things can change. And as far as the latest science, we don't know exactly what triggered this particular event. To give you a sense of scale, wastewater treatment plants throughout the bay contribute about 2/3 of the nutrients that get into the bay. So it's a significant source, but not the only source. There's nutrients coming from agriculture, from the upstream rivers, and just runoff into the bay. So one important thing from our perspective is that our main wastewater treatment plant was not designed originally to remove nutrients. So what happens is you flush your toilet, and your personal waste, your poop and pee contains nutrients, and that just comes to our plant, and we treat it for many, many other things, but we don't treat the nutrients at the moment. It passes through into the bay. However, that's actually not entirely true, because we are working on innovative ways to use our existing infrastructure, even though it wasn't designed to do this, to reduce nitrogen going to the bay. And we've had a couple of years of demonstration testing of this new process, slightly altered parameters to our process, operational processes, and we've found very good success so far. So we think we're going to be able to remove significant amounts of nutrients, even though we won't have to build significant $14 billion worth of new capital infrastructure. And then, sorry, okay, so, sorry, did I skip one? No, I did not, okay. So the next slide is, I'm transitioning into the topic of aging infrastructure. So for us, even though this presentation is wastewater in the future, for us, the past is the future, because we're going to have to be dealing with the past and this old infrastructure for years to come. It's a good thing and a bad thing. I mean, we built most of this infrastructure 60 to 70 years ago. Here's a image showing our treatment plant from an aerial view, and everything that's orange and red was built in the 50s through the 70s. So that's almost everything. All the major processes were all constructed way back then. And so our main task as engineers is to design rehabilitation and renewal of these facilities to keep everything running. And that's really the bulk of the work we do on a daily basis, is to make sure everything continues to run, and that we look out to make sure that we are implementing projects that will continue to make things run into the future. And so aging infrastructure, I don't know what conjures up in most people's minds, but there's a very specific things what comes to my mind when we talk about this. And the primary thing is just deterioration, and that can manifest in a couple different ways. Using equipment wears down that equipment. Put concrete structures out there, it weathers over time. But the big one for us is corrosion. And I'll explain a little bit more about that and how wastewater is a particularly challenging environment for corrosion. But other ways that aging infrastructure manifests is that the performance of our existing processes and equipment just reduces over time. You have to, no matter how well you maintain it, it's going to cost more to run, more to maintain, and your benefits or your performance will get lower over time. And another one that we see increasingly is just pure obsolescence. We have equipment that worked well until we needed to replace parts, and those parts are no longer available, or they need to be custom made, or the software isn't supported anymore. And that happens more and more every day. And lastly, just the changing codes and standards that were used in the original design don't apply today, and those standards have been raised. And so especially when it comes to structural design, like for seismic, those codes have changed drastically, and we have to upgrade our infrastructure to meet today's codes. So I mentioned corrosion, and I think the simplest way to explain how challenging an environment wastewater is to think of the odors. The stinkier it gets, the more corrosive the environment. And it happens to be because the same bacteria that develop the odor compounds are causing corrosion. It's called microbially induced corrosion. And so what that means is the stinkiest place in our system, from your house out to the bay, is right down into the sewer, in our interceptors, and then in the front of our plant, the preliminary and primary treatment. So color coding here indicates the degree of odor and the rate of corrosion. The higher the rate of corrosion, the more odors. And so that, even though much of this infrastructure is so old, it's in this very corrosive environment. And fortunately, it was designed for that environment, but over time, it must be renewed and replaced. And here's an example of how the outcome of that. So sometimes we don't stay ahead of these things, and challenging situations present themselves. And so up here on the upper left, in our interceptor system, last year we had a couple events where a sinkhole developed. Fortunately, it was never in a terribly busy or dangerous locations, very fortunate locations, but we had some sinkholes open up. This one pictured here is near the Oakland Coliseum. And then the picture below it is once we excavated away all the soil around it to see what the pipe looked like. And you can see this pipe has a hole in it, but it's also a very thin walled pipe at that point. But when this pipe was new, that pipe wall was several inches thick. So it had corroded away significantly by the time we got to it at this location. And then to the right, there's another location. This one is in Alameda, where we caught it before there was a sinkhole. But as you can see, just if you can tell what you're looking at, we're looking down the pipe inside it, and the interior of the mortar that covers the inside of the pipe has all been corroded away. And those darker lines are rebar, structural and reinforcement within the pipe wall. And so once that reaches that corrosive environment, it quickly loses its structural strength, and we have to rehab it immediately. But fortunately, we did rehab these locations. Oops. Well, I'll get to that in a second, but here's some examples from the main wastewater treatment plant. So not only that very corrosive environment, you can see those this pump, and this yellow pump, and then a riser pipe shown very corroded, rusted away. And then concrete deterioration on the right, not as dramatic as the previous pictures. And then a picture on the left of some very old pumps, excuse me, that need to be replaced so that we can continue to operate them. We have a steady capital improvement program to replace and improve and renew this infrastructure. And so here's some more positive pictures of how we go about renewing that infrastructure. So the most common way we rehabilitate those large interceptor pipes is to insert brand new pipes inside them. And so this is a method called slip lining. And you can see this pit on the left where a giant pipe segment has been lowered down to the level of the existing pipe, and then it gets pushed in until you've completely essentially replaced that corroded away concrete pipe. And there's a picture next to it with the already installed pipe with no water inside it, so you can see it a little bit better. But you can tell that when we do projects like this, we have to stage these segments of pipe at the surface in the surrounding area. So it does take a lot. It happens fairly quickly, but it takes up a lot of space when we're in progress. And then finally, you can see the replaced riser pipe. You saw that corroded pipe on the last picture, but this in the upper right-hand corner is a secondary clarifier with brand new mechanical equipment and riser pipe in the middle. And then on the bottom right, rehabilitated concrete with no more exposed rebar, nice smooth surface, brand new essentially. And now I will pass it on to Zoe to complete the presentation.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Jennifer. Hello, everyone. I'm Zoe Lake. I'm a wastewater control representative at EBMUD. So I wanted to talk about the rule of the 3 Ps, as we call it. It'll help you remember to flush only pee, poop, and toilet paper, and that's what the plant was designed to treat. So please only flush your human waste because other items can cause clogs and other issues. But that said, here are other items that can go down the drain or flush. Soap, your shampoos, cleaning products, food particles are fine to receive at the plant. They may cause issues in your own pipes, but they're not of concern for us. We always recommend using eco-friendly products where possible. And most residential cleaning products that you can find at a department store, like chlorine bleach, are safe for our wastewater treatment process. So these are items that we really encourage you. We say do not flush them down the drain. And they include everything on this slide and more: basic trash, medications, tampons, pads, paper towels, fats, oils, and grease, and wipes. So grease and wipes can be very disruptive for property owners. The grease can harden in the pipes, resulting in clogs. And then if you add wipes, those can catch your hair or your trash, or maybe you put your dental floss down there because you didn't mean to, but it can all get stuck together. So manufacturers might label packages as flushable, but they really very, very likely are not able to be flushed. They don't break down in water, they clump, and there's actually federal legislation in the works to prevent manufacturers from labeling these wipes as flushable. So when in doubt, please throw it out. So for a visual of what happens when people put items that they shouldn't put down the drain, it's a mess. So these are our fine screens all clogged up. There was so much trash that it spilled over, and our staff had to suit up and shovel it out and put it in our trash. So it will end up in a dumpster and it will go to a landfill here. So please save us the mess and the hazard and don't put your trash down the drain. So back to this, as the holidays approach and you're cooking up a storm, perhaps, please remember never to put your fats, oils, or grease down the drain. We call it fog, F-O-G. You can see how it hardens in the unpleasant picture above. Save yourself the headache and expense. And when the fog is cool to the touch, put it in a container. And you can put small amounts in your compost. You can put it in a container in the trash, and you can deposit it at drop-off sites for use. So you can check our website, ebmud.com/fog, F-O-G, and you can find drop-off locations, and you can also order a free grease scraper. So always something good to remember when you're having guests and perhaps using lots of cooking oil. So another item not to put down the drain is your medication. Please never flush your meds. Pharmaceuticals cannot be fully removed by traditional wastewater. And the best approach for pharmaceuticals is preventing them from getting in the wastewater in the first place. So please put your unwanted medicine in disposal bins located throughout our service area. For more information, you can visit the websites on the slide. You can go to eastbaymud.com/cleanbay, and you can go to medproject.org, or if you're outside of this immediate county area, you can go to Don't Rush the Flush. And this area on the slide at the bottom is to show you how easy it is. You put in your zip code and you can put in the radius and you can find where you can drop off. And they also offer mail-back envelopes as well. So I want to talk more about the I&I, inflow and infiltration, that Jennifer and Matt mentioned earlier. It's that water that flows into leaky sewer pipes from groundwater and stormwater. It's a major issue in our service area. And for some context, our average dry weather flow at the main wastewater treatment plant is about 52 million gallons per day. And last year during a major storm, we had a peak at around 400 million gallons. So about 50 to about 400 is an enormous leap. East Bay Mud works to reduce this I&I with partnerships with property owners. There are 1,600 miles of private sewer laterals. We work with satellite cities, the cities that we serve, and they maintain 1,600 miles of their own sewer lines that eventually connect to the East Bay Mud infrastructure. And we're working on our capital projects, like Matt mentioned, and our aging infrastructure, of course, as well. So as part of our regional technical support program with our service area cities, we do smoke testing and CCTV inspections, dye testing, flow monitoring, and the city-owned infrastructure to help inform their capital projects to reduce the I&I as well. Oops. Sorry, folks. Well, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the private sewer lateral program, and I see that I have my virtual tour slide, but I don't want to skip it. So let's go back here, and I want to tell you about the PSL program. I work with a lot of the inspectors, and it's a really good program here at East Bay Mud. So if you have a property that connects to a sewer line, you have a private sewer lateral, and it needs to be free from leaks. It conveys your wastewater, the toilet, the laundry, all the drains to the city-owned and maintained or sanitary district-owned and maintained sewer mains in the street, and then brings it to the wastewater treatment plant. And we want that line to be leak-free. We don't want any water to be seeping into it and coming to the wastewater treatment plant because it's rainwater and stormwater, and it should be going into the stormwater system. So we have a program that's dedicated to working with the satellite cities and property owners to inspect and replace leaky laterals when properties are sold or major remodels are performed. And customers can also voluntarily inspect their private sewer laterals. So through the program, there's been about 650 miles of PSLs, private sewer laterals, that have been certified leak-free. So we're working all the time to reduce that I&I. So in addition to the 3 Ps, avoiding the fog clogs and putting your meds in the designated bin, property owners can also check their private sewer laterals. If you'd like to learn more about the treatment plant process, how your wastewater is treated, this is a great online resource. There's short videos that show at the plant the different stages with narration to explain the different steps. And you can find that on our education website, ebmud.com/education. Oh, there's that private sewer lateral slide, but you all know about that already. So I want to highlight East Bay MUD as an organization. We have about 2,000 employees, about 300 in the wastewater department, and there are all kinds of jobs that are opening up. And you can check for jobs on our website, ebmud.com/jobs. And particularly, I want to highlight our wastewater operators. They're vital to all that we do, and you can learn more about the career path on eastbaymud.com/jobs, that same website. So on the screen, you'll see part of a career ladder that is available on the website. It's quite packed with information, but I wanted to highlight that the current salary schedule has a wastewater plant operator 1 who has 1 year of experience and a plant operator grade 1 certification at about $100,000 per year. And East Bay MUD also offers competitive benefits and excellent retirement, fully paid health insurance, dental and vision, and tuition reimbursement. I also can't skip that we cultivate a work environment where all employees and applicants receive equal employment opportunities and respect for cultural and gender differences. So my colleagues on the slide here, I work with most of them. They are stellar at what they do, and working at the district, it's a mission-driven career. And we care about each other and the work that we do to protect public health and the San Francisco Bay. I encourage anyone interested to check out the jobs website and to reach out with any questions. So the last thing is, remember, your toilet is not a trash can. Keep your meds out of the bay and keep your pipes free of clogs and leaks. And I'll pass it back to Rolando now to start our Q&A. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I certainly learned a lot. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to stop sharing the screen, and then we are going to be asking some of the questions. Please, if you have any questions, put them in the Q&A chat so we can answer them. But here we're going to start answering some questions that came in. If you're curious about anything that we presented today, please put your questions in the Q&A chat box at the bottom of your screen. All right, so the first question, it says, Marin County is testing water to track COVID and RSV incidents overall and by area. Is East Bay MUD doing this? And if so, when does it occur in the treatment process? Would Jennifer or Matt answer that?
Yeah, the quick answer, yes, we are tracking COVID. I believe RSV and some other viruses as well. And we have a website on ebmud.com that we can probably post to the Q&A on we call this wastewater surveillance. And I think the question also asked, where in the process do we do this? It's at our influent pump station, so right where the raw wastewater comes in.
All right, well, thank you. The next question is, how does methane produce electricity? So either Amit, Jennifer, or Matt answer that question.
I can take that. Methane is used in internal combustion engines, just like our car, but instead of the gasoline, we use methane. It has the pistons. The pistons goes up and down, and it runs a giant motor which produces the electricity, and that is hooked up to our plant electrical distribution system. That's how we generate electricity from methane.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Amit. The next question, it says, what is the ratio of spent versus benefit of producing biogas? Is the cost an efficient process?
I can answer that. Actually, it is part of our solids treatment process that we have to treat the waste anaerobically to lower the volume. So it is actually a byproduct. So we are actually converting waste to methane. So it's a byproduct of treatment. And we also take food waste and high strength waste that comes in. We also mix it in our digesters to produce gas, and they pay us a tipping fee for that. And then we get the extra gas to run our engines to produce electricity. And we actually produce more electricity than we need In the summertime, we explore about 1 megawatts to 1.5 megawatts to Port of Oakland.
All right, well, thank you. All right, the next question that we have is, how many people does it take to run a system like this? How many employees? I guess we need to make a differentiation between the wastewater system and the water systems, but how many employees does it take to run a system like this?
300.
300. Okay, is that just for the wastewater system, I mean?
305 actually, just for wastewater, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. That was a simple answer.
And I'll just add that East Bay Med total has near almost 2,000
Those
employees total.
Yes, okay. The next question is, does East Bay Mud have to fight a rodent problem such as rats that run around the wastewater pipes, or are those or do those provide some benefit to the system?
Are there Ninja Turtles in the sewer?
I'm sure there are, but they have not created problems for us. Whether as far as the benefit, I don't think so.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. And again, I remind people that if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A chat box so we can answer your questions. Or you can also send us questions at the Water Wednesday at EBMUD.com. If you don't want to ask a question now, you can send us a question to that email address. All right, next question is, what process is used to remove chlorine from the water?
We use sodium bisulfite.
Okay, thank you. All right, the next question is, freezer gel packs seem to always be printed with the message drain safe. Is this actually safe? I guess that would be one for Zoe.
I think it depends on what it is. And generally at the wastewater treatment plant, the volumes that we're treating, we're already adding chlorine to the water to reduce odors and to treat as part of the treatment plant process. So if it's something like chlorine, that wouldn't be an issue for us, but I think we'd have to know. And if you have questions that are specific about specific products, you're welcome to email us cleanbay@ebmud.com. And that's a place where you can ask pollution prevention questions if you're trying to do the best practice there.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Zoe. All right. The next question is, as East Bay Mud upgrades equipment, what are the plans to improve treatment to reduce or eliminate nutrients, drugs, pesticides, etc.? Matt mentioned testing on reducing nitrogen. When will it be implemented? So I guess that's a question for you, Matt.
Yeah, now actually, I mean, we have gone through multiple years of testing of that, and each year the duration and the amount of water we're treating has grown, and we've proven that it's effective, and we are going to plan to expand again next year, and then the year after that, so 2 years from now, we will treat the entire flow during our dry weather period to reduce nutrients or nitrogen specifically.
All right. Well, thank you. All right. This next question is for Zoe. Is there any financing available through East Bay Mud for PSL repair?
I don't work directly in that group, actually. So maybe that's a question for community affairs.
Yes, that's a question that we can actually get from that group, from the private sewer lateral group, and perhaps post it. If you can send that question to Water Wednesday at eastbaymud.com, and we will do our best to answer you promptly. Well, thank you very much. All right, so the next question we have is more feedback. Let me see if I read this correctly. More feedback than, I think it was a typo there. Let me skip that question and come back to it. How often should I have my home's private sewer lateral inspected for leaks? So
unless someone, I think it depends on your...
That might be a community affairs question too, and we can also answer that if you would I can
add that inspecting it will inform you about the condition of it, which will then inform the frequency needed. So it will be specific to yours, but I think you can email community affairs for further answer.
Yeah, and actually I can answer that question. If you have never inspected your private sewer lateral and you've been in there for more than 10 years, it's a good idea to inspect it. I'll give you a quick anecdote for myself. Where I live, actually, we started to notice that it was raining very slowly. We've been there for 18 years. We did a visual inspection with a camera, and we realized that the tree in front of our home, the roots had broken through the pipe, and we had to fix and repair it and just replace our private sewer lateral because it was just things were coming back to the house, so to speak. So it's a good idea if you have never done it and you've been there more than 10 years that you do a quick inspection. You can hire contractors to put a camera down the private sewer lateral and see if it's in good shape. So but if you've been there more than 10 years, I would recommend that you inspect it, especially if you're thinking about selling the home. It's one of the conditions that you need to disclose if it's in good state or not. All right, so
we have two questions about microplastics. So, I mean, could you talk a little bit about microplastics?
So yes, microplastic, we have been observing the levels in the bay for a good long time now because it has been a concern. But issues with microplastic is there is no direct treatment in our treatment methods that we use at the plant to remove microplastics. So source control is the best way to control it. And also we found the majority contribution from microplastic is not even from the wastewater treatment plant, it's from the stormwater runoff.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Here's a question. Can you give more detail about laws to prevent flushable wipes from being sold that way? I guess that would be for you, Zoe, if you know
There's
the answer.
federal legislation. It's called the WIPES Act, WIPPES, and it was introduced on May 29th of this year. So if you wanted to look more into that, it's happening. I really, really hope it happens. I really don't want flushable on those packages. It's very misleading, disruptive for everyone.
Okay. Well, thank you, Zoe. Okay, the next question that we have here is, when planning to deal with storm surge, do you also consider tsunami risk? How well are your facilities protected against exceptionally severe and fast water level rise? Although it may be temporary, but how are we planning to deal with a sudden surge and I guess in a storm like a tsunami?
So for tsunami, we actually did do a tsunami risk plan. So we evaluated two different types of scenarios. One was like a long range earthquake, like Alaska, I forgot what the range was, and one was a near range. So basically, we know what areas we have to basically evacuate or tell staff to avoid, which is basically the dechlorination area. That's basically our area with high risk for a tsunami. So basically, we just keep an eye on things and just tell staff to avoid the area until the tsunami has passed.
Okay, all right. We have a question here. It's what is your yearly budget to improve the collection and treatment system?
I can answer that. And one, just to be like real particular about the wording. So collection system, we usually refer to the cities, City of Oakland, City of Berkeley, et cetera. We have our interceptor system, which is substantially less length of pipe than those collection systems. So just to give you the sense of the kind of the scale of the numbers I'm about to say. So first of all, it varies year to year. So treatment is usually the big one. And we, in the past, we've said 80% is spent on treatment and then 20% on interceptors. But if you look forward, if you look at our CIP right now, we actually have a lot of interceptor rehab work. So that proportion is changing. And so typically in a year, again, looking backwards, our historical capital spending is about 50 million a year. But looking forwards, like we're getting up to 60, 70, 80 as the years go on, and we are spending anywhere from 20, 25 million on interceptors and the remainder on treatment. So,
okay. Well, thank you,
The
Matt.
only thing I will add, Orlando, to what Matt already said, $350 million in capital project in the next 5 years.
Okay. Well, thank you, Amit. Here's one that I'm not sure if we can answer, but the person asked, what is the status of the Point Isabel wet weather plant?
it's in working condition. It is going to be used if we need it for high storm inflow infiltration situation.
Okay. All right. It's just we have a couple more questions, and again, we're going to go into about 7 o'clock. We got a couple more questions, so if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A chat function. But the next question is, does EBMUD ever partner with academic researchers for studying the microbes helping or corroding the system? So that we partner with the researchers.
I can answer that question because we have an interest in doing that. Unfortunately, the researchers are not so interested in corrosion in wastewater pipes because they think it's kind of a very well understood process. So we've actually reached out to different researchers on the topic and haven't quite found the right topic to pique their interest. So, all right,
thank you. Rolando, I will add, we do other academic research partnership with universities as well as water research foundations, as well as other scientific organizations all around the Bay. So, we are studying the Hiroshima Akashio and the growth kinetics and what triggers its, in the Bay Area, what triggers its growth pattern with the, with the faculty of San Francisco State University and UC Santa Cruz. And, in the past, we have worked with other universities as well.
Okay. Well, thanks, Amit. Thank you. All right, here we got, it seems like the last question. Central Sands and Contra Costa County also uses UV light in their process, but apparently you don't, meaning us, EBMUD. Do you plan to do that in the future?
No, because UV is, yes, it doesn't use chemicals, but it is extremely expensive capital project. And also we have issues with it because of turbidity. You need to have the turbidity of the water very low for it to become efficient. So yes, it is an option, but we are not considering it right now.
Okay, well, thank you, Amit. That seems to be our last question. So if there's nobody has any further questions, I don't see any in the Q&A. I certainly learned a lot while doing this webinar and planning for this webinar. Just to remind people that this webinar is going to be posted on EBMUD YouTube channel, and a link will be sent to you and everybody who registered in case you couldn't make it tonight, or if you want to review it again. You can also send us follow-up questions to waterwednesday@ebmud.com. I would like to thank our presenters, Zoe Lake, Jennifer Koo, Matt Heft, and also Mr. Amit Musuri for joining us and helping answer your questions. And I also would like to thank Catherine Horn for helping us manage this webinar. The next Water Wednesday will be on Wednesday, February 21st of 2024. And we'll focus on UC Berkeley Center for the Smart Infrastructure. The speakers for that will be Dr. Kenichi Soga, professor at UC Berkeley, Clifford Chan, EBMUD's general manager, and David Katzev, who is EBMUD's senior civil engineer. That was a great presentation, but I would like to thank everybody for coming. I hope you learned something interesting, and I would like to thank you for coming, and have a good evening and enjoy your holidays. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a good evening.
Thank you.